Join the charge. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Heck, we're even on TikTok. There's something for everyone here. We're excited to engage with you. We hope you'll join us moving forward.
Happy Friday. Welcome to Stock Talk. We are joined by Brian Ostroff, who's the president of ARIANNE Phosphate. How are you doing this wonderful Friday?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you. Fridays are always nice.
Yes. Now I'm just going to jump off and be a little bit aggressive with you guys, because it's been, say, the last 1 month you're up like 60%, which is awesome. So I hate being too promotional, but that's great to see. So it seems like your hard work of getting out there, explaining to people, and then putting a lot of things together. They're starting to get the message that food's important. Food's important to us as human beings, but it's this fertilizer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, right now, maybe the stock's enjoying a little bit of a renaissance. We had a great kind of late spring and into early summer, throughout the summer and early fall. I guess like a lot of the small caps, they tend to get a little heavy. Sleepy. Everyone's off at the beach rather than sitting in front of their screens and taking meetings. And so, look, over that period of time, I'd say that the fundamentals continue to improve. And now I guess everyone's back at their desk, and there've been a few significant pieces of news in our world. Yes. And I think that's just kind of bringing attention back to Arianne.
And before we jump into a lot of this news, like on the macro scale, is that your company is specifically of key interest because of the deposit, the location, friendly jurisdiction, and the high grade. So when we're talking about fertilizer, and we're distinguishing between phosphate and potash and other ones that have also enjoyed success in the past and some success now, what we're so in is the high grade that you have in Quebec. I think we lost connection there for a moment.
Yeah.
We're back.
I'm sure it was a great question.
It was really good. So I was just kind of touching on the high grade in Quebec, the unique position and prospect for Arianne Phosphate in regards to the entire sector. And I like to always kind of point out, we're going to talk macro, we're going to talk about China, we're going to talk about a bunch of things, but narrowing it down, why we like to have you on is specifically because of the situation your company's in.
Yeah, look, there's no question. Aside from the overall macro of phosphate and fertilizer and foods and the importance of it, one of the beauties of Arianne is, look, we are in the province of Quebec, Canada, very mining friendly jurisdiction. Unfortunately, phosphate by and large comes from areas of the world that just are not known for their security of supply. And I think that it's an important point as people need to realize you can have the most fertile soils in Saskatchewan or Nebraska or Iowa, but you still need the fertilizers. And, people don't worry about things until they worry about things. And
yes,
I think what we've seen over the last little while is a confluence of events that are forcing people's attention back to, hey, I need food, I need ag, I need fertilizer. Where's this stuff come from? And what happens into the future, especially if some things start to go wrong.
Yes. And I mean, that's what we try to do over here, is get people in early and ahead of the curve, as we like to say, and these macro issues. And really, when we're talking, it's not just that we're talking about food and fertilizer, because I think some people will get lost and go, it doesn't sound sexy, and go, but it is, because what we're really talking about is supply chain. We're talking about all these ships sitting off and shore that are not moving. They're not getting their products out. We hear like there's 100 boats off the coast of California, and we see this chain of custody of where you sourcing goods, where are they coming from. This whole issue, this logistics, is really under strain. And for however long, I don't know, but also the food macro is very critical right now. And having a source in North America that you don't have to ship around, because we talked about shipping containers up 400-500% in the last year in cost. There's a lot of many big macro outlooks and issues that we're really talking about while trying to avoid a lot of the political stuff that we have to take a look at. And at the end of the day, we don't realize how sexy food is until you really need it. Then you realize, oh my goodness, the shelves are getting empty. There's inflation. There's this, there's that. What's the solution here?
Yeah, well, certainly the solution is getting more phosphate into the system. Certainly when it comes to North America, like many other parts of the world, we run a deficit, and it's something that we need. Phosphate, the demand for phosphate grows every single year. Doesn't matter if the economy is good or bad, but the markets are good or bad. You need more, and you need more, and you need more. I think, look, things are starting to get a little bit more acute in the sense that these cycles run long cycles. We've had a 7-year downtrend in fertilizer prices, phosphate prices, 2012 through 2019. And what happens when for 7 years prices go down? People stop worrying about supply and ramping up the supply. But again, you've got something here where your demand is growing every single year. And after 7 years, but the demand's been growing, and all of a sudden, you find yourself with some pretty real strains. Yeah. And we live in markets, and that supply-demand imbalance, guess what? It manifests itself not only in food shortages, but also price. And I think that's where we see ourselves right now. And unfortunately, I guess for the consumer, I don't think it's going to abate anytime soon.
No, I don't anticipate it. And I mean, people will say, Andrew, try not to focus on negative things. And I mentioned the negative things, not because to get people stressed out about, inflation and food shortage and supply chain issues, but it's to let people know, wait a second, there is a solution that you can look at, and positioning yourself and getting that story out. Is that, listen, if you look at something, say Arianne Phosphate, you can hedge yourself, and you can be in really early. That's going to solve the issue. And I mean, let's talk about one of the biggest issues that's in the news. I think it was just a couple of days ago in regards to China. And you can't talk about anything in the economy without talking about China as being such a major consumer and as well as producer in the entire economic stratosphere. Walk us through what is kind of happening here in regards to fertilizer. They put out that news release about, I think it was 3 days ago.
Yeah, it was maybe a little bit longer than that, okay. But yeah, recent news, relatively recent news. So, phosphate concentrate, the actual powder that goes in fact, here it is. It kind of looks like sand. That's the stuff that goes in and ultimately gets made into the fertilizer, the MAP and the DAP. Now, Middle East and North Africa is by far the predominant producer and seller of the concentrates. China is actually a substantial producer of the fertilizer, so the product that you make, the MAP and the DAP. Now, a couple of weeks back, they had announced that they were halting all exports of phosphate fertilizers through June of 2022. Now, I need people to think a bit about this. China represents about 30% of the market in the phosphate fertilizers. You just had these guys say, sorry, we're closed for business. Doesn't matter if we contracted with you, offtakes, anything like that. We're closed for business. And so let's kind of walk this through. What does this mean? Well, India is the world's largest importer of phosphate. About half of the phosphate imports into India year to date have come from China.
Yeah.
That's a population of 1.3 billion. They need to grow food.
Yeah.
And now that phosphate is not available to them. And that's going to have ramifications unto itself. And, I think something to think about is China has said that they are not shipping through 2022.
Yes.
Now, a lot of analysts that I've read have taken that as, well, that means they'll be there in July of 2022.
Yeah.
And they may well be.
Yeah.
But they didn't say that they will be there in July of 2022. They said they're not shipping through June of 2022. And those are not the same.
No.
So, look, even if they are back in July, you'll have missed a planting season. That's 9 months. People are going to be affected. It's going to, what's the downstream of that? Is it less crops? It's definitely more expensive. Fertilizer prices are going to go up. Grain prices are going to go up. But, to your earlier point about, we're here in Canada, I think once again, unfortunately, the world is learning about security of supply.
Yes.
And phosphate, whether it's the concentrate or the finished product, I think most people would prefer to have that supply coming from a jurisdiction like Canada. So, you've got that, and you're coming into a time of year. So, historically speaking, from a cycles point of view, late fall through the spring is when prices tend to rise, demand's a little heavier, a lot heavier, really, so that the farmer is ready to go as the snow melts and it's time to go. And traditionally, what you see is the price come off during the summer and early fall. And most of the farmers I spoke with, last May-ish, were expecting the same thing, particularly in light of how strong a move up we had in say, DAP prices. The interesting thing is this summer and early fall prices really didn't come down at all. $5 a ton, $10 a ton, after going up $300 a ton. And so now you're going into a time of year where traditionally the fert prices again move up, demand is up, and that's being met with China saying, sorry,
yeah,
we're out. And look, anyone's guess is just that, a guess, and mine's just a guess. But I don't see how this doesn't continue to move fert prices higher. And look, ultimately, I don't see how it doesn't continue to have people pay attention to what Arianne is offering, which is a good, clean, big, permitted source of phosphate.
So let me ask this, and I'll jump back to some of these other kind of big theme macro ones because they're interesting. What would it take? Say everyone is on board and goes, all right, we need to do this. Let's get Arianne going. Like what would it take in regard to resources? I think it was something like, including the port, it'd be like $1 billion to build out this mine. If all today, government was like, listen, we get it. We need to start moving on this. What would be the time frame? What would it look like? What would that look like if people would go, we need to get Arianne Phosphate going and get this moving?
Sure. So Look, in our feasibility, the capex was projected at 1.2 billion, and look, you would run a negative cash flow and what have you. I mean, it is a big boy project, if you will. You know, you're looking 1.3-ish, 1.5. But you know, at today's prices, and even back when, I had always said, look, you know, it is a big project, it is a big cost, but people also need to understand what's on the other side. In other words, today, you know, in production, we would be generating revenue of $600 million a year. We should generate gross profits of north of 370 million dollars. So, you know, to your point, look, and this, of course, is not 43-101. This is really just back of the envelope.
Yes.
Yeah. But, you know, your 3 years, 4 years payback, and then, you know, you are good for decade upon decade upon decade. And you have so the economics are extremely compelling.
Yeah.
And, you know, the security of supply is extremely compelling.
Yes.
So, you know, what does it take? For us, we're in the process of trying to wrap up the last of our offtakes. That's what the banks need to see to give us our debt package. And so we're busy with that. Obviously, as supply concerns happen, as prices move up and all of that, you know, we think that is going to be very beneficial to us in concluding these deals. You know, once that's all in place, once we have our financing, the projected build of this mine is 24 to 28 months.
Okay.
But that said, usually when you are in a position, when a single asset development company is in a position to be able to say, all done, financed, shovel ready to hit the ground, usually trade towards, or even sometimes above, but in and around 1 times projected EBITDA for your first year.
Yes.
So look, given where we are right now and given what that would be, that's a pretty substantial re-rating, and then ultimately, as it is in production and we start generating all those profits, you know, I think it looks
very compelling.
Attractive. Yeah, very compelling.
Very compelling. And I mean, even if you were to assume, okay, let's assume even a worst case scenario, if the price gets cut in half, so you get 1 year of it, you're still talking what, a 7-year, 8-year payback? Like, I mean, it would be stretched out a bit, but you're not talking like, close the project down. Like, it's not.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, look, once this thing's in production, it should really always be profitable.
Yes.
Even if you were to go back at the low of the lows in late 2019, you know, we would still be gross profiting a decent amount of money. Like, once in production, we are definitely projected to be amongst the world's lowest cash cost providers. So, you know, we feel pretty comfortable in the position that we would be in. And again, you know, you are ultimately talking about a very important resource, something that humanity needs.
And just to take a step back too, because people, if they're curious, the tenor between China and India isn't great, to say the least. They've had actual skirmishes in the last year. So that plays into the mix, and that's a separate conversation we won't bother getting into. But if you have set interest, take a look. If people say, well, are they friends? Do they get along? They don't really get along. Now, if we don't have, this kind of comes back to that interconnectedness of things, where it's positive and also where there's a chink in one part of a supply chain, it starts, a lot of things can unravel very quickly. And when we're talking about a chink like food supply, all of a sudden, that's a game changer worldwide. because people don't realize, wait a second, well, where do we get this fertilizer from? Well, it's mainly from the Middle East. Okay, well, wait a second. It has to come in a shipping container. We ship it over here. That's gone up 500%. What's this look like? Wrapping this all together, it starts to realize, wait a second, we were shipping this from here to here. Like, shouldn't we have this? Shouldn't we have access to some of this basic stuff so we have control of our own destiny? Like, I think a lot of people start to wonder, it's kind of like that kind of, I make a part for a car here in Vancouver. We then ship it to Mexico for another part to be then assembled in Vietnam and then sent back to Toronto. You go, isn't there a better way?
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on your show. Like, we've all gotten used to this just-in-time delivery, and the thing about it is it works great as long as everything shows up just in time.
Yes.
And so what we see right now is a perfect example of you just need one little kink in this, and things don't show up just in time, and then you've got lots of trouble. And we're seeing that. Interestingly though, your point earlier about India and China and really a lot of the world, most nations are frenemies. They're friends in some cases and enemies in other. What we are definitely seeing is even a level of food nationalism.
Yes.
And some countries, it really does manifest itself. I mean, at the end of the day, again, looking into what has gone on with regards to China, that was done not to goose the price or anything like that. That's because they've determined that they need it.
Yes.
They come first. And look, rightfully so. If it's something involving India comes first.
Of course.
If it involves the United States comes first.
That's the way it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, it's all great until it's not.
Yes.
You've got a precious resource, and countries are reevaluating that. And so again, here's Arianne. Here's a project. It's in North America. At some point, North America is going to think about, maybe I really need to worry about North America.
Yes.
So
I'm going to make a little bit of a kind of semi-association. And it was kind of like the critical metals discussion, which is still ongoing. A couple of years ago, and people are saying, we need to have some control of this rare earth because China has 90% or 78% in vanadium and other resources that are very unique and specific, that you may not need a ton of it, but you need to have it. Say if you want to have GPS, if you want to have any kind of aeroflight, or it's very specific. You go, well, if we have zero control over that supply, this is now a national issue, national security issue, and we're getting close to a situation where that is an issue. And once again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to be very mindful of, not only do we have like one issue where it's okay, China's decided not to do this, is that we've got like 5 or 8 major issues going on right now in the world, between inflation, supply issues. We've got COVID, work, not work, this, that. I mean, there's a lot that really, it needs to be almost like government motivated to go, all right, we have a project. Let's get going. Let's solve this issue before it gets too out of control.
Yeah. And so I think that's why you see in places like China, where it's even Russia for that matter, where it's a little bit more of a state-controlled economy, that they go and they do that. Look, we need the fertilizer. This is what it's going to be. In some Western jurisdictions, US, Canada, I think we rely on the markets to address our concerns. Look, I'd like to believe that governments here are starting to realize that this might be a challenge. But again, it gets manifest in price, higher prices, and then ultimately corporates or private equity or what have you, will step in Western jurisdictions and say, look, this of course is an important thing, but it also makes good money sense, and good projects get done. It's interesting because, inevitably a lot of things all hit at the same time. And so you've got some strains, you've got strains on phosphate. In Europe, you have big strains even on ammonia, which is a component in fertilizer because of natural gas prices.
Yeah.
And then even when it comes to potash, like, looking at it from a European point of view, they would get a lot of potash from Belarus. But now Belarus and the EU aren't seeing eye to eye. So, you've got all these inputs that are going up in price or even getting harder to source. That means it's going to be harder to get the grains we need. The other thing is we've seen, with decarbonization and looking for ways to be more environmentally friendly, one thing that has emerged a lot is people wanting to do a lot more of the biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel. What are the consequences of that? Well, the consequences of that is demand for more grains. Big players, Chevron and Exxon, they're getting into this business, and they're going to be big drivers of demand. In fact, the Financial Times, maybe about a month ago, had a very interesting article called Diesel versus Donuts that went just into this subject, right? So you have the vegetable oils, but now you have another consumer of that, and you're causing stress in the system. You need more soybeans for soy oil, or corn for corn oil, or canola oil. Well, you know what? All of this has to be grown, and that means you need more fertilizer. What was interesting is in the article that I see is up here on the screen, they talked about a lot of the bakers, the companies that do baked goods like Krispy Kreme. They've warned, they've said that the added strain in the system, it's making it harder for them to get the vegetable oils that they need, and obviously their margins are being impacted. So you've got that across the board. There's specific to vegetable oils and biofuels, but food prices are going up. Everything's going up. Margins are getting squeezed. Look, you wear the hat of a humanitarian, and you say, this is alarming and not good for society. You wear the hat of a capitalist, and you say, I'm pretty happy where we're positioned. But these higher food prices are going to cause unrest. I mean, not in the West, but in developing nations, and it's
the impact
looking into the future. It's really going to be very, very impactful.
And once again, we're doing a lot of things. We're doing a lot of things at once. Like when you're saying the decarbonization, you're just speaking about one portion. It's a big portion, but one portion in that chain. And whether or not you're saying also we're not going to say offshore drill in California. We're also not going to do that, and we're also not going to do the following. And then this. You go. That's a lot of initiatives to undertake for even the swiftest of governments to go. I admire your chutzpah. But maybe we should do this on a smaller scale, step by step. Trying to do everything all at once might be a bit onerous.
Look, there are repercussions, right? We all know that every action causes a reaction. And, that's the case of, when you're trying to change your energy policies. And to your point, like, you're hitting it on all sides. More biofuels. Batteries. Well, where are you going to find some of these materials quickly enough? no more coal-fired power plants. Well, I understand that, but now there's not enough electricity. That's why
Yes.
natural gas prices in Europe spiked to $30. And what's the offshoot of that? Well, less ammonia. Less ammonia means less fertilizer, means less crops.
Yeah.
And so, it's an issue. And so, even aside from that, even in some other uses, there's the most common herbicide is glyphosate.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
because of the Hurricane Ida a few months ago that knocked out big American production of it, and then most of the rest of it actually comes out of China. And so there are shortages developing even in the herbicides that the farmers need. So you might have more infestations, which means less crops. And so, to your point, you don't want to sound doom and gloom. And I always say this, I don't mean to be an alarmist. I'm just sounding the alarm.
Yes.
And so, that's where we are, and some of these other uses and challenges, and again, the demand for food isn't going to go away,
No. And I don't think it's being alarmist. I don't think it's also because you're offering a solution. So it's different if it's just Andrew's coming on here and he's upset about this, and he's letting people know, okay, that's possibly of benefit. But what I try to do as well is have a guest on and says, we acknowledge this, we see this risk, and you certainly are an expert in this field. You speak on this for decades. You know everything about fertilizer growing and whatnot. Is that you're saying, I have a solution for you, though. So it isn't just here's all doom and gloom. It's we have a solution.
Yep.
Do you want to get on board? And it's also not correlated to the market. So you have a bit of a proxy against any market concerns by looking specifically at you guys. And I don't often come out and say specific companies, but because the nature of your project, where it is the high grade and the very unique predicament we're in, I feel a lot safer to be looking specifically at you guys as a solution.
Yeah. Well, look, you bring up a very good point. Traditionally, you look at FERT, ag investments. They are not correlated with the overall markets. So, if you're a portfolio manager just running your own portfolio, it's always nice to have a slice of something that isn't going to move exactly the way the S&P is. And then, to your point, look, inflation's upon us. Food inflation is very much upon us. And what better way to hedge off against food inflation than food, ag, ferts? So, look, everyone's got to kind of make a decision for themselves in terms of their portfolios and what fits. And look, we still are an early stage situation and not without risk. I'd argue that the risk return here definitely merits it. And, personally, I'm a big shareholder, but, depending your circumstances, well, at the very least, even in the world of blue chips, I think having ag and that segment is important. But, ultimately, you take a look at the valuation of our company and the necessity of our product and what that means in dollars and cents. And, certainly I think it's a fairly compelling argument.
Compelling. And it certainly rises to the top whenever someone decides that, listen, we hear a lot of doom and gloom on TV all the time, but if I spend a little bit of time and I research and look and go, yeah, this is a problem. But once again, someone's offering a solution. It's about vocalizing that and getting people on board with, even if it is like literally calling the government saying, why are we not, what are we doing? Like, let's get on this.
Yeah.
But listen, we've been talking quite a bit, and I could talk for another half hour, but we should really wrap this up. Is there anything else you want to just kind of let us know here? Because we're going to catch up with you again real soon, because this is, like I said, this isn't going away, and there's going to be a lot more news in the next couple of weeks, months. And we didn't even touch on specifically what other sectors that you might be able to even work on. We talked about food, we talked about fertilizer, but maybe we could have you on and walk us through where else, your product could possibly go.
Yes, just to end off on that. Look, aside from the fact that Arianne is very fortunate to be in the jurisdiction that they are in, Arianne, because of the nature of the geology, it does allow us to produce a very high purity phosphate concentrate. And look, most phosphate does wind up in fertilizer, like 85%. But there are growing uses outside of fertilizer. So it can be used as a food preservative. It can be used in animal feeds and a bunch of other things, including LFP, lithium iron phosphate batteries now are starting to get a little bit of attention.
Interesting.
You know, yeah. And so again, Arianne's fortunate because the nature of our phosphate concentrate really would allow us to go across the spectrum of uses. So the basic fertilizer, all the way through more technical applications. And, maybe that's worth a further discussion at some point in the future.
Yeah, let me look into that as well. So I've got some good questions for you, but that is very compelling, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you for once again educating us, keeping us abreast of what's happening, and more also giving some optimism, because I always like when people have solutions, when they've got, it isn't just let's talk about the problem, is that you can situate yourself, talk to your advisor, talk to whoever it is that's helping you plan, but tell them the story and what's happening. And I mean, they're going to acknowledge the issues that are out there. And a lot of what we're saying is common sense. It's just, we're used to in the last months and decades of not having to necessarily worry so much about certain things that are certainly things we need to worry about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, again, you don't worry about it until you worry about it. And at that point, it's usually too late.
It's too late. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Brian. Enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend.
Great. Thanks a lot, Andrew. Appreciate it.